think that here in Leicester, and we don't know, it's just so up in the air at the moment what is going to happen, but if we do leave in March, if that happens, do you think we need to create some sort of culture for that time so that people don't feel the shock of it as after the vote when there was a huge rise in hate crime? I don't know what the reaction's going to be. I mean, Leicester on the whole is a pretty accepting place, but there are people who aren't accepting in Leicester. And do you think we ought to prepare for that in some way? And if so, how?
Well, it's interesting. I was sat here thinking that, you know, whilst Leicester is in general, you know, quite liberal, the county is often, and you know, love Hinckley and Bosworth where I'm from, once represented my village on the local council, love it. Great people, but it's often quite small C conservative. And I think these are the folks that often for perfectly noble reasons, although sometimes not, voted for Brexit. And part of me does think, you know, that maybe even what we're saying here tonight is all absolutely right and all quite nice and liberal, I guess. And I do just sometimes think, how are we going to work with those who, often for their own valid reasons, because they feel the establishment, whether local, national, European, left them behind and didn't give a flying toss about them, saw that vote as the one time where, unlike a lot of general elections, when their vote doesn't really count in a lot of seats that are safe seats, they knew that the Prime Minister's vote meant the same as their vote, and they used it to give the establishment a kick in. Now, the great irony is that I think a lot of those people will end up paying the price of their own vote, and I think, you know, that's kind of almost a Shakespearean tragedy, actually. But how do we begin to have conversations with those people who have felt left behind by the establishment and who now are going to be left behind again, ironically, because of their own vote and votes of many more millions like them? And I think we you know, I think there's a danger that we just remain in our liberal bubble saying very nice, tolerant things, as of course we should, but actually don't break out of that bubble and talk to those communities that feel very different about some of these issues. And actually, I think we'll only stop there being, not further Brexits, because I think one's quite enough, but further issues by speaking to those communities and learning about their fears and concerns, and not just thinking, oh, they're all just a load of bigoted people, because of course they're not.
I echo that very briefly, but you know, as I said at the start, what's driven my work is to try and understand white supremacists, but also hate group communities. And I think until you have an understanding of why they believe things they do, and acknowledge that they are equally complex in their belief systems, even if they are ones that you find morally reprehensible, that until you understand those systems, then it's almost impossible to start breaking down those borders.
Because these sort of situations were resolved in the past from word of mouth. You know, now we're talking about technology, but it's still word of mouth. People still need to interact with one another to have that empathy and understanding face to face. That'd be my opinion.
Yeah, definitely, and that links all of what we're doing is making those spaces, trying to bring people together from different groups. If we can find a way to do that, and like I said, there's a lead-in period. You have to build those relationships. You have to make people feel safe and welcome and valid in those spaces, and that's a project. I mean, like, there's a danger with what someone once said called hit and run art projects, where you literally like parachuted in and then you leave, and you can end up doing more damage than good. And you've got to slowly, make those connections, make those spaces. And there's a certain amount that you can do online and building connections, but the next step is getting people, like you rightly said, face to face, where they can actually perhaps have challenging conversations. And that's the thing, we're very worried about challenging conversations. If we can actually, what we need post-Brexit is actually like peace building. between communities with very different ideas.
But I echo that too, in terms of what we're going to try and do with the Festival of Justice and Journey to Justice. 11th to 27th of September, did I mention that? The key is to leave a lasting legacy. That we don't want the parachuting arts metaphor to be happening. We want to make sure that where we create walks of justice across the city, breaking down community borders, joining up different stories of justice, we want those to remain afterwards. So those should be a permanent part of our city. And whether they're linked through an app that walks you through and you can hear poetry as you're on the walk, that would be fantastic. And that's the kind of thing that we think needs to be an ongoing project. And if the art of the public meeting is dying, well, let's either do more. Let's not fight that. Let's think, well, what will work instead? What will engage current communities? And if that is an app-driven walk of justice, let's make that as brilliant as we can.
Or go into the schools, meet the parents. At the end of the day, mothers are core to society, and I think they're being marginalised at the moment. So we have all the gender issues and that, but it's also mother as well. And I think mothers have that empathic role traditionally, that they could embrace all of these issues as well. So I think mothers should be focused on as well. Just an idea.
Maybe Mothers Without Borders.
Start it up.
I think a lot of mothers are keeping quiet at the moment. What's happening to children, education, and it's mothers that usually embrace the gay communities and so on and so on. And I think that, mothers, what I've noticed, I've been away a long time, come back the last 2 years, and I see that mothers are being marginalised, both in education, no matter what's being said, and elsewhere, even with their own children, with the use of technology and so on. That's very...
I suppose it's about unpicking what we mean by the word mothers, isn't
yes,
it?
Of course.
Because I suppose what I'm sensing is this kind of a lovingness and warmth and openness, and I mean I suppose I would feel that's open to all genders, and but I think the qualities of what you're talking about I would absolutely agree with, but I hope that could be shared across the board really.
Sorry, just to add on to that, I think there is a certain stigma with schools surrounding politics, because of course they don't want to offend different groups and parents. So, I mean, I think there is a certain limit to what they can do and who they can involve, because, I mean, schools aren't really there to be political and there to marginalise different groups and things. And, I mean, schools like, for example, my school, they've tried like loads of efforts to include everyone. So, for example, for the Brexit deal, my teacher did a thing when everyone would vote and then the votes counted, she would vote, so we all got a chance almost to kind of vote, and we all voted yes, but I mean, I think there is a certain limit to what they can do, because even doing that, she got a few angry parent calls, or why are you like making my daughter do this and stuff. So I think there is a limit to what they can do.
Did you vote yes to stay or yes to go?
Yes to stay.
Yeah, I think schools are a really crucial place to support young people to investigate politics. There's a project that the National Literacy Trust do around fake news, helping young people analyse the press so that they can really investigate when they're being led or sort of spun a certain way. There are lots of poetry projects that I work on in schools, and fighting for those creative spaces in schools where young people can say what they want to say, not what needs to be in an exam, which is the main driving force, more than it was when we were at school, I think. And I think all the work that we're doing young people can hear about it if the schools let us in, and that's often the problem, I reckon.
But often it's interesting, isn't it, that outside of my LGBT role, I campaign for the youth service to be brought back and to be refunded in and to be made a statutory service, because often actually conversations that couldn't be had at school and maybe shouldn't have been had at school were had with professional qualified youth workers when there used to be a proper youth service, and it's been decimated across the country, including here in Leicester. I should just say that our youth groups at the LGBT Centre are funded by Leicester City Council, and so thank you very much to them for that. But in many parts of the country it's been decimated, and actually that's where you could have those challenging conversations that you couldn't necessarily have either at home or at school. And so I think it's a great shame that service has gone.
The only other thing I was just thinking to add as well is that any resident, if you put in your postcode, you can find out who your MP is and you can write to them, and it might not seem like a big thing, but there is always a caseworker at the end of the email, like an inbox. I was that caseworker one time and they have to reply to them. And you know, if you maybe send one, maybe they'll ignore it, but if you get a few more people, they'll reply. Like I wrote to my own MP about kind of a work-related issue, and I got an actual reply, and she forwarded it to the Home Office's office, I guess, the foreign director, and then I got one back as well. So it may not be a huge deal, but at least you know, like, your issues. Someone had to look at it, someone had to write, someone had to Google what you were talking about. So those little things too, eventually.
I think, you know what you were saying about the media being in London, which I'm sure it is, and loads of things are in London. But as a Londoner, leaving London's a bit scary sometimes, because you're used to living in this society that's very accepting, no one like looks at you differently, and then you leave, you're like, oh, I wonder if this is going to be similar to London, or it's going to be very different from London. And that's the game you basically play the moment you leave, like Waterloo Station or something. So so I think it's good when you do, like, you know, like come into places like here, and I've been there twice before, so I know what it's like. But it helps the more we get out into, you know, maybe even like villages and, you know, like Ledbury, or I've never been to Ledbury before. And then, yeah, sort of doing like cross-cultural, cross-city work, you know, and stuff. I think that's really like, yeah, it's really helpful.
Well, everybody's welcome to a metal gig anytime.
And you were reminding me as well of, I don't know, was it, I think Jeremy Corbyn did a speech actually on media a couple of months ago, and there was lots of different kind of ideas, but one that actually got a lot of support kind of cross-party was tax exemptions for local journalistic bureaus, kind of, which is, that kind of work is really important, because big newspapers aren't going to cover what could be a really interesting, important story for a town or a smaller city, but, you know, a local place will. So I guess picking up on, like, that's something as well that we would, like, that actually got a lot of support from lots of different parts of Parliament. So it's noticing that that's an important issue as well.